Hello there, Sorry from 17 once again. This is my Dead Space 2 Zealot difficulty, no upgrades, no damage, and no shop run. We are in Chapter 3, and I'm going to be looting the room that we had such an awkward time in previously. And just notice from the difference between my aim right now and my aim when we were hanging from the ceiling. The section is interesting because not only does it adds a kind of momentum or inertia. I'm not entirely sure what the technical term is for the buoyancy of when you're on that thing, but the way that it affects the mouse is so uniquely strange to me. It feels so weird. And there's another section in the game that does it. You know when you're on top of the drilling machine in Chapter 12? When you're on top of that and it turns a corner, it does the same thing to your aim. It makes your aim drag, and I don't really understand why developers insist on these moments where our aim is affected for no good reason other than cinematic choices. We were just on a train just then, and in some video games, trains affect your movement and your aiming and everything, and it's one of those cinematic things where it's annoying and nobody likes it, but they do it anyway. Hi! That was fun. I love chasing down those programmed runaway moments just to see where they go. If you shoot him, he doesn't die for some reason. He has to go and open event, I think. But on this game, the train didn't affect our aiming at all. It didn't make it sway or any of the standard tropes that happen. So it's interesting that they chose not to do it with the train, but they chose to do it on top of the drill. And the drill doesn't move that much. By the way, this is the first instance of taking on the pact. So this is me going to show you what I like doing to them, which is one shot, one kill, as quickly as I can. And it's so good for your aim, guys. It's really good practice doing this, and it feels badass. There's him doing his little jump. They will never do that jumps to the side unless you're aiming at them. It's another one of those aim-specific behaviours. But how cool did that look, right? You might play on controller on the lowest sensitivity, and you might have had a nightmare on this fight, and then you see somebody do that, and it just looks ridiculous, right? It looks like you're in the Matrix. But that's what's cool about it. That's what makes it feel so fun. And that's the reason why when I came back to this, I couldn't just do a standard run. Because mouse and keyboard are such a game changer if you can learn to use them, that you'll never go back to controller, guys. You just won't. Like, for some things you will. Like, I would never play an action game on a keyboard, because that would just be weird. But when it comes to aiming, it's just better. And I can aim on controller. I aimed on controller for over 20 years. And I think controller is good at what it is, and I think you can get very good at it, and I think it's a very, very good skill. But even with all that considered, the best player on controller in his best day cannot beat the guy on mouse. It can't be done, because the precision just isn't there. And one of those devices is being tool assisted, the other one isn't. And it's such a big thing. And I don't want to turn this into a commentary where it's like master PC race, you know, get a PC and everything like that, because there's no need. I just want to make it obvious that I couldn't do what I'm doing in these videos on controller, and I'm good on controller. I could do this run on controller. It'd be more difficult, but I'd definitely be able to do it. But I wouldn't be having the same amount of fun, and it wouldn't look as baller as it does at times, because there's just something about your capacity. Like what I did just then would have taken longer. You know, it's just that universal truth of the mouse affords me a lot of luxury. But this room is another one. This is another instance where your aim is affected by the crazy feeling of acceleration and just swimmy aim. So be very careful. There's also an additional spawn here of the kids, so make sure you spawn them and then pick them off and then put yourself in a corner and know that they can't come from behind you. And right now I was a little bit nervous because I expected a few more, but we got them. It just looks so much fun though, doesn't it? I was doing the final boss the other day, and I had the cheat engine on to give me unlimited ammunition where I didn't have to reload, and all I was doing is shooting the kids, letting Nicole keep spawning more of those kids and then shooting them and shooting them and shooting them, and trying to get a feel for where they were spawning and trying to get my aim down so I could do it really quickly and hopefully be able to capture that fight under the stipulations. But it's such a long fight, and it's so easy to get cut off and get clipped. But we have a vent to go through. I'm going to be trimming out all the vents because they're the one aspect of this game, other than some of the space sections, that I just don't really understand why they exist. They're definitely the part of the game. Don't do this, by the way. Do not do this. You can use him later on. I was a little bit paranoid that there was some enemies going to be in front, so I wanted to steal some resources, and it turns out the spawn is after we come back through these rooms. But another feature that's quite dynamic in Dead Space is you tend to get ammunition given to you of the weapon that you are carrying. So a good way to earn money in these games is to carry the gun that has the most valuable ammunition, and then you can sell its ammunition if you don't want to use it, and then pick up the ammo that you like. Because my stipulation for the challenge is to not use the shop, I can't buy ammo. I can't buy anything from the shop, it's just one of the rules, so that's not really something that I need to do. And because I can't use the shop, and I have to use the plasma cutter because every other gun in the game is acquired via the shop, which I think is a little bit disappointing. There's no other reason but to carry the gun I'm carrying. But because I know the spawn now, I'm going to go and pick up those javelins before I press this button, and it's going to give me an advantage when I touch this room and then come out. Because as you move back down this corridor, it trips the next enemy wave. So straight in front of you there's going to be a standard puker who we could use, but I'm going to waste everything on and get nothing back. And then there are two standard slashers who I'm going to be shooting to stop, which is something that needs to be mentioned if you don't know. And then there's an explodey guy. So the necromorphs work like this. When you shoot a necromorph, if you don't hit its limb, you will generally not stun it. If you dismember a limb, it tends to be stunned in some cases. The black necromorphs are much more resilient and much more dangerous for this. But the rule when they attack is the rule that's the most interesting one. So when a necromorph attacks, if you shoot it, it completely stops its attack. 100% consistent, brilliant design. I love it. Doesn't matter if they're black, doesn't matter if they're standard. When you shoot them, when they're attacking, it will stop the animation, and it will stop their attack. There is one enemy that defies this law, in my experience of this run, because everything else has kind of obeyed it really, really well. I didn't try it on the Regenerator, because I don't try it on him, he's stupid. And that is the Leapers. So, the reason, as I call them the Whiptails, the reason I do not like that enemy is because it cheats. Not only is it incredibly fast and difficult to kill, but it also completely ignores the rules of the game. And it's when it jumps at you. So when it attacks you with its whip and its really fast tail attack, you can shoot it and it will stop it. It obeys that rule. When a normal slasher jumps at you, if you shoot them, you'll stop them. But when the Leaper jumps at you, if you shoot him, he still attacks. He continues his attack. And I don't know why the game adheres to this double standard, because if it didn't, the enemy would be flawless. It would be difficult, but it would be controllable. Because the only time you get hit by that enemy is when you make a mistake and it gets close, where you should get hit, or when it jumps at you. Because when it jumps at you, it's so fast and its tracking is so good, you can't move away from it. So you have to commit to stopping it. So you shoot it, and it just flies through your round and hits you. And I have a video, it's a fail video, of a whiptail hitting me repeatedly on a section that took me like 40 minutes to do. Because the easiest way to do it is to kite the enemies and not fight it. But I wanted to fight it because I had the ammo, and the mentality that I've used on this run is if I have a good supply of ammunition, I'm doing the fight. Doesn't matter if it can be skipped, doesn't matter if you can use some kind of fun exploit to get around it, I'm going to do the fight. And that's the rules that I've done this run with. I try to fight as much as possible, but there are some instances where I was too nervous for my ammo on the other side of the fight that I didn't do it. And if I could have got ammunition and it wouldn't have affected the run and I could have constantly had enough ammunition, I would have done every single fight in the game. Because when you do a challenge run, you're doing it to overcome challenge, right? You're not wanting to skip it. And a lot of the challenge runs for Dead Space I've seen on YouTube are all speedrun criteria. So the people playing them are amazing players and they do really fascinating things, but they run past everything. And I didn't want my videos to be that. Not because I don't think that that's impressive or good, but that's not my style. Not only am I not a speedrunner, but I don't generally like to run past fights unless I dislike them. Like if it's a fight that I don't like, or that I have a problem with, on a fundamental design perspective, then I'll skip that shit with no regrets. But if it's something that's hard, I want to do it. And that's what's kind of frustrating about the final boss, If the final boss was a boss that I had to attack that was like a brute, or like the final boss in the first game, or even in the third game, like the third game... Didn't the third game have some bosses that weren't just gimmick fights? I think it did, like that tentacle one was a fight. If it was something like that, where I had to survive, like a good example is Evil Within 2. The final boss in Evil Within 2 is a piece of shit. It's really easy, it's got super telegraphed, easy to dodge moves, it's boring as hell. The only remotely awkward part about it is that it spawns spiders and it has tons of HP. That is a fight that I did without upgrades and without taking damage and all that kind of fun stuff on the hardest difficulty, and it took forever to do it because I didn't have the right guns, I didn't have enough ammo, and I was pretty much finishing the boss off with a pistol. The fight itself took like 10 to 15 minutes of just gameplay, but I did it because it's a boss. It's a shit boss, but it's a boss nonetheless. Gimmick bosses, I don't have that same kind of drive because in my opinion, gimmick bosses aren't hard, they're awkward. And that's what's true. If you had to fight Nicole, and it was just Nicole, and she had tons of different attacks and patterns, and she fired shit at you, like, imagine Nicole if she manifested into all the different types of necromorphs, and she had all their different abilities, and she could call on them at random. So she could fire the puke at you, or she could leap at you, but it was not bullshit and you could stop it or dodge it. You know, she could call on any of the different abilities. She could get the 3 tentacles and whip those things at you. Just imagine if there was something interesting to her like that. Or something, I don't know. Like, just make her a boss. If she transformed into something huge and disgusting, and she was like a double brute with wings, anything, make it so that it's a fight that I can do through sheer attrition, right? But it's not. It's, here's an enemy that walks around and teleports and instantly kills you when it's close enough to you, and here is a bunch of enemies that spawn repeatedly, and depending on where they spawn depends on whether or not you're going to get fucked. And that's the real boss. The real boss is surviving the spawn. When those enemies spawn, that's the hard part. Everything else is easy and controllable, but getting into a position where you can kite them, where you don't get hit, is awkward and tricky, and that's the true skill. And in my opinion, that's not a boss. So as much as I've just, rationalized the reason why I'm not doing it, and some people will just convey that as me making excuses, which is perfectly fine if you want to believe that. But I don't. And don't do what I just did then, it doesn't work. You need to... You're better off carrying it in the elevator, but one thing you'll find in this game is when you move between areas sometimes, whatever you're carrying in kinesis will disappear. And then we have a pretty tough fight coming up. So the spawn here is an infector just in front of you, so make sure you kill him. There is going to be 2 pukers, and where they spawn depends on the game. They can either spawn in that archway where he is, or to my left over there. I should be using the vomit. I'm not using the vomit. This is all a mistake. It's unoptimized garbage. Don't watch this run. And then there's going to be that guy, and then one guy behind me. But this does not have to happen this way. One thing you'll learn if you repeat these sections to learn on another infector. But the first thing you learn in this game, if you repeat these sections to try and learn spawns and get super optimal paths, is that the spawns are different depending on where you stand. Because the enemies come out of vents, depending on what part of the room you're on, and depending on what direction your back is at, will depend on what vent they come out of. And you can use it to control it in some circumstances, but there are other moments where it just doesn't really work. And then there's also incidents in this game where the enemies are different. One attempt, it'll be this, one attempt, it'll be that. And I noticed it in 2 areas. But the most easy area to spot it is the first fight on chapter 13, after you've done the drill. When you move forward into that room where you have to hack that door, and there's those 2 entrances full of bad guys, and you come up against those, are they called lurkers? Those ones with the tentacles? Your first ever black lurker, I think, is in that room. Which, that's the end of the game, and they're throwing a new enemy. It's pretty cool, right? Even though he is a palette swap, of course. So in that room at the beginning, if you reload the checkpoint, and you push forward, you'll see a puker run off, and you'll see one of the exploders run off with him. And then if you restart it again, it'll be a puker and a black slasher. And then you restart it again, and it's the black slasher again. And then you restart it again, black slasher. And then it's the exploder. So there's this weird wiggle room with initial spawns that I don't understand, but I think that certain rooms have 2 potential spawns that can happen. It doesn't make a big difference in the grand scheme of the game, although I would definitely recommend on that fight I just mentioned that you get the exploder and not the slasher, because the slasher's a dickhead. But thank you for watching, and you take care now.